Our second reading comes from 2 Kings chapter 5, verses 1 through 14. May God add his blessing to the reading and the proclamation of his word. Naaman, commander of the army of the king of Aram, was a great man and in high favor with his master, because by him the Lord had given victory to Aram. The man, though a mighty warrior, suffered from leprosy. Now the Arameans, on one of their raids, had taken a young girl captive from the land of Israel, and she served Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, "If only my lord were with the prophet who's in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy." So Naaman went in and told his lord just what the girl from the land of Israel had said. And the king of Aram said, "Go then, and I will send along a letter to the king of Israel." He went, taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 sets of garments. He brought the letter to the king of Israel, which read, "When this letter reaches you, know that I have sent to you my servant Naaman, that you may cure him of his leprosy." When the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes and said, "Am I God to give death or life, that this man sends word to me to cure a man of his leprosy? Just look and see how he's trying to pick a quarrel with me." But when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, he sent a message to the king. "Why have you torn your clothes? Let him come to me, that he may learn that there is a prophet in Israel." So Naaman came with his horses and chariots and halted at the entrance of Elisha's house. Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, "Go, wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored, and you shall be clean." But Naaman became angry and went away, saying, "I thought that for me he would surely come out and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God and wave his hand over the spot and cure the leprosy. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be clean?" He turned and went away in a rage. But his servants approached and said to him, "Father, if the prophet had commanded you to do something difficult, would you not have done it? How much more when all he said to you was, 'Wash and be clean'?" So he went down and immersed himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the word of the man of God. His flesh was restored like the flesh of a young boy, and he was clean. Well, Naaman, in many ways, is just like all of us. He may be a powerful military leader with great wealth and important connections, but he has a health problem, and he needs help. All people who are sick or in pain want help. It doesn't matter if the pain is emotional or physical, or if it's caused by society's opinion of the condition. New Testament stories of people and Jesus include many who suffered afflictions, and some of them were desperate, and they were willing to take great chances. We remember the woman with the issue of blood. She dared to take her unclean self into a crowd of people. If anyone in that crowd had recognized her as how unclean she was, she could have faced severe punishment, even death, for coming among them and making them unclean with her presence. She did this to move into the crowd, to touch Jesus' garment, and she was healed. Jesus said he felt the power go out of him. The blind and the crippled called out to them. Sometimes they were creating quite an uproar, and that upset the disciples and other officials who were around. But they called out because they needed him, and they were healed. And then there was the crippled man with the 4 friends. Remember, they carried him on a stretcher. They carried him up a ladder onto the roof of the home where Jesus was teaching inside. And they worked through the roof, making a hole, and they lowered the man down on the stretcher. And in Jesus' presence, he was healed. These people and many others were desperate. And what they had in common was their awareness of the greatest source of healing. It was simple. Just go to Jesus. Their faith in the healer provided exactly what they needed. But this is an Old Testament warrior from the country of Aram, once part of Israel, but now under control of the armies of the king of Syria. and did not have the knowledge and the experience to turn to the one true God. Naaman is a highly regarded man. He is remarkable and honorable. He is a mighty man of valor, but he is a man with leprosy, a man whose answer to most every problem was to use his wealth and his power to seek some magic. He was a proud man, but he was a man without faith. You see, this leprosy would end his life of pride and privilege. A diagnosis of leprosy was deeply feared. The Hebrew word for leprosy refers to a wide range of skin diseases, patchy disfigurements, white patches on the skin, and they would grow worse over time. So Naaman had this skin disease, and it was clearly still in the early stages. And he'd been able to keep his skin covered with his garments, but he wasn't going to be able to do that very much longer. And he knew that it would be recognized. And as it worsened, he wanted help. He feared a life of disfigurement. He feared death. And more than that, he feared being ostracized by the people who used to respect him. He needed healing. And so Naaman's journey begins. It's a journey that would take him to another country on the advice of an Israelite slave girl, a journey that he was willing to finance with his wealth and his power. It was a journey that would teach him humility and obedience. It was a journey along a route that he did not find enjoyable at all, but it was a journey that would finally take him to healing and would indeed bring him to faith. Naaman was prepared to provide an amazing amount of wealth for this healing. 10 talents of silver. A talent was an ancient measure of weight, about 75 pounds, or about the weight that a single man could carry. 10 talents, then, is 750 pounds of silver. 6,000 shekels of gold. The combined annual wages of 600 common laborers. Together with the silver, when converted into today's buying power, this equals about $750 million. And we thought healthcare today was expensive. In addition to that, Naaman's willing to throw in 10 sets of new clothes. There's great pride in being able to offer such a payment. Now, the slave girl did not instruct Naaman to offer a fortune in return for wellness. Now, Naaman is also a powerful military man, and so he goes to his king, seeking his support. And the king agrees, and a letter accompanies him, giving permission to the king of Israel to cure Naaman, which the king of Israel knows is not going to happen. He can't do that. He's not a holy man. He's not a healer. So he wonders, is this a way the Arameans are trying to provoke a war? This was a misstep on Naaman's journey. The young slave girl instructed her mistress that a prophet in Samaria could heal her husband. No kings were involved in that promise at all. So far we see that the money doesn't guarantee the healing, and asking the king to pave the way in this special letter doesn't guarantee the healing. But fortunately for Naaman, the prophet Elijah hears how upset his own king is about this supposed threat. After all, he's tearing his clothes off over it. So Elijah steps in and he directs Naaman be sent to him. Now, notice that Elijah does not ask for his own letter from the king, and he doesn't even ask how much this will pay if he does this good work. No comments about any fortunes being offered, because Elijah is the prophet of the God of Israel, Almighty God, the creator of all things. So Naaman's journey takes a detour, chariots and all, to the house of Elijah, where he expects to be greeted with fanfare, with honor, and with great respect. Elisha instead sends out a servant, a messenger, with simple instructions. And Naaman expected so much more. He certainly expected to be face to face with this powerful prophet. You see, what Naaman is really looking for is some magic. And Elijah is careful to avoid the magician's role. This confused Naaman. And the message to go and bathe, well, if it's just water, why did he have to travel so far? If it's just water, there are rivers at home. They're probably way better than any river in Israel. What's the need for this journey? Now we see the money isn't going to guarantee the healing. The letter from king to king went nowhere. And now this prophet magician is refusing to even meet with him face to face. So apparently no magic powers are available. Naaman is absolutely furious over this wasted time and this wasted travel and this outrageous lack of respect. And he turns away in a rage. Money didn't talk. Powerful instructions from a king didn't talk. The promised prophet isn't even talking to him either. Only a servant delivers this message. Go to the river Jordan and wash 7 times. Only a servant speaks to him. Then in the face of Naaman's rage, again, servants speak, and they speak with reason and with sensibility. And Naaman is suddenly humbled, and he hears them. He hears the reasoning and the advice from the Israelite slave girl, and he acquiesces to the simple guidance of his own slaves. He's humbled. He's humbled now, and he follows the instructions, and he washes 7 times in the river Jordan, and Naaman is healed. Finally, he set aside his pride. He opened himself to the leading of a prophet of God. He listened and he obeyed. And the word of the man of God, his flesh was restored like the flesh of a young boy, and he was made clean. And the healing journey is complete. This journey was made possible by the servants, by those lowest on the socioeconomic ladder of the day. You see, they knew what it was like to lack resources. They knew what it was like to be powerless. And they'd learned throughout their lowly lives that the important thing, the thing that absolutely mattered the most, was to trust God and to live in humility and to live in faith. In their trust, in their faith, these servants were able to be the voices that would enable Naaman's healing. The voices that would set him out on a journey to a prophet of God well known in the slave girl's homeland. In the face of Naaman's rage, the servants were the unexpected voice of God. And they insisted that Naaman listen to them, that he stop his ranting and his misbehaving and listen to the directions of the prophet's messenger. And Naaman was able to set aside his own inflated sense of self-worth. He was able to humble himself in trust and obedience. Naaman steps away from his stubbornness. He steps away from his foolishness, and he steps into faith. His pride nearly prevented him from finding healing. He was so insulted by this perceived slight from Elijah. He wouldn't meet with him face to face and heal him in a magical way. He nearly missed out on the healing. But when pride was set aside, Naaman is able to follow Elijah's instructions with humility. Naaman's journey affirms for us that pride must never jeopardize an opportunity to be made whole through God's grace and God's love. Pride has long been acknowledged as a source of many sins. Too often, pride prevents us from taking the extended hand of love and care that's offered to us. Too often, pride undermines our ability to draw close to God. So we should open our eyes and look for those among us who are like that Israelite slave girl. Asking nothing for herself, she longs to share the power of love and healing that she knows is available in her God, the one true God, because her freedom is not found in wealth or power, but rests in the God she worships and adores. She wants to share the good news of this true God with this pagan household, which has actually enslaved her. It's her testimony that begins the journey for Naaman. And perhaps if he'd just taken time to speak with her face to face, he could have avoided the need for the letter from the king to the other king. He could have avoided the accumulation of all that wealth and weight and the chariots and the horses and the men. She would have just directed him to simply travel and seek out the man of God, the prophet Elisha. The lessons for Naaman on the journey prepared him, though, to be humble. They enabled him to listen to voices other than those of power, gave him time to develop his spiritual understanding, and led him to the obedience that provided the healing from this skin disorder, and offered him the greatest healing, and that is the knowledge of the God of Israel. There are lessons for each of us along the journey of life, lessons that foster humility, lessons that remind us that money doesn't buy health or love or happiness, lessons that remind us that sometimes the voice we should be listening to, the voice we should be hearing, is not the loudest voice. It's not the most important voice, but the voice that directs us to God. Naaman, humbled, trusting, and obedient, washed himself in the river Jordan as instructed, and he accepted there is no God in all the earth except the God of Israel. This is a story of new life, a story of healing through the power of God and through the gift of the water. It's an affirmation of the same power of God that we saw in the baptism of his only son, Jesus, in that very same river Jordan. New life offered to us each day in a community of faith. A journey stretches out for us. It's a journey that we do not walk alone. It's a journey of healing and redemption. It's a journey to be made with humility and thanksgiving and with trust. It's a journey that sometimes feels desperate, but it's a journey that's made with confidence in the love and the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.